Hey there, Cosmic Warriors, and welcome back to another video. And if you are new here, my name is Hannah. I'm a Western Practical Astrologer. Okay, so today we are going to be talking all about your second eighth house axis. Yes, we're going to be exploring the second house and the eighth house in astrology. I'm looking forward to this one. I hope you do find it to be useful and interesting. And of course, if you do, please make sure to like the video and subscribe for more. Plus, if you would like to book a reading with me, you can always head on over to my website, hannahselsewhere.com. And if you would like to learn more about astrology, then go over to the Cosmic Check-In podcast. We are currently working our way through the dark side of the signs. And if you would like to learn more about astrology further by looking at things in a more simplified way, you can always pick up a copy of my bestseller, The Astrology Cheat Sheets. Thank you so much. Just to let you know as well that there are episodes up on the Cosmic Check-In podcast all about the 12 houses. So I dedicate an episode to each of the houses so you can learn more over there. All the links, by the way, are in the description box if you're interested. Right. Well, let's just go over this brief overview, looking at the second eighth house axis. And again, just for more detailed information, you can check out the podcast episodes. But whenever we explore the second house and the eighth house, notice here that the second house is so much about your personal earnings, how you spend your money, how you save your money, how you budget it. Kind of think of it as an account in your name. But then the eighth house, you see, is more about joint partnerships, joint ventures. This can, of course, even apply to that of business partnerships too, right? So we think about companies, organizations, right? It's about joint spending, it's about joint earnings. And naturally, whenever marriage is involved in this, we think about having a joint account. So that would be one example. And even if you're not married, just look at it as you and your significant other, you and your partner joining, combining your resources, combining your materials, your money. Though, just one other thing to mention about this, we can also view this through a lens of your partner's earnings. If you want to know more about your partner's earnings, look to the eighth house in your chart. Furthermore, the second house is so much about your personal values, especially, we think about our core values. What are your core values? So this is more about you as an individual, you on a more personal level. Now, with that in mind, the eighth house opposite is about shared values. You could even look at this as what kinds of values do you value within a partner, within a significant other? How aligned are you in terms of your values? But yes, it's more about the combining of your values. The second house also pertains to that of your self-worth. But then you see the eighth house is about your intimate life. Plus, I would also argue here, the eighth house can show up as how your self-worth is challenged via another. We think about here inner security linked to the second house. But then whenever we do bond with another, whenever we join together in a more emotional manner, what happens? How is your self-worth maybe impacted or influenced or triggered? Hey, triggered. We do get triggered when it comes to these eighth house influences. So thinking even about vulnerability. How vulnerable can you be even? How open can you be with your partner, with your significant other? Can you be more intimate, right? The eighth house is so much about intimacy. And yes, intimacy can show up in a sexual way, but intimacy can also show up via emotions. Okay, it's about this emotional bond, and hey, it's about trust, vulnerability. So that's what it says there as well. Relationship with trust. How trusting are you? And what is required in order for you to build trust, in order for you to feel this more trusting relationship? Of course, the whole thing about trust is, what's the saying? It can take years and years to build trust, but it can take seconds to break it. Indeed. But then also with the second house just here, it's more so about your personal relationship with possessions, ownership, possessions, assets, finances. So yeah, your personal relationship with these things. But think about the eighth house. It's much deeper. It's much more profound. And then the eighth house is also about taking others into consideration. And I'm just going to finish off by saying this. The eighth house is just massively about sharing in general, right? Whenever it comes to relationships, think about the seventh house opposite. And we explored this. We explored this within the first house, seventh house video, right? We looked at the ascendant signs, the descendant signs. So the descendant / the seventh house sits opposite the first house, and the seventh house is about partnerships. It's about relationships. But you see, the eighth house comes after and takes things a step further. Okay, it really does look at things in a deeper way. And it's truly about how it is that you share of yourself. And that sharing can be more emotional, it can be more intellectual. Sharing can show up in different ways. That, it's not just about basically sharing financially. How do you share of yourself? How vulnerable even can you be? Okay, so with all of that explained, let's go through your signs, the houses basically. And I just further want to mention that if you want more detailed descriptions about this, you can always book a reading with me. But let's see what comes out, shall we? Okay, so first of all, we have Aries in the second house with Libra in the eighth house. And it could very well be that you have a Pisces rising with this combination, okay? Right. So with Aries in the second house, first and foremost, what we notice here is that some of your core values are tied to that of your independence. This is about being able to act, being able to initiate, and to face challenges in life, right? You value these parts of yourself. You may even prioritize these kinds of things in your life. Now, we also can see this in terms of, when it comes to your personal earnings, your personal spendings, you're quite individual and independent. Again, these kinds of things are what you value. You can even be quite protective of your possessions, of your assets, the things that you own. Perhaps also you're rather pioneering when it comes to your finances. I mean, you could be quite gifted in terms of starting something new, right? You could innovate. You could act as a bit of a trailblazer, a pioneer, and that can show up in a financial way. Thinking even about a certain project that you're daring about. So you get the ball rolling essentially here. So you can draw from those gifts, of course. And then also, I'll say here, when it comes to your self-worth, I think that if or when your self-worth is ever disrespected or triggered, that can anger you greatly. Now, you may not necessarily show that outwardly, but there is this sense of, no, you're not going to mess with me, right? Now, with the eighth house, what we notice here when it comes to your intimate life is that I think that you do value partnership, to relate to another. I think that when it comes to really bonding emotionally with another person, you try to come at things from a pretty harmonious way where you try to see eye to eye, you try to cooperate, you want to get along in this regard. And I do think that you try to keep the peace. Now, what we can see here then is that there can be clashes. So, for instance, whenever there is a disagreement perhaps about joint finances or joint spending and sharing and things like that, there could be some inner tension that arises. And that within itself can manifest as, for example, people pleasing or feeling like you need to adjust yourself in order to be on the same page. But that if you can understand, that can often clash with these values of yours, right? With your core values. So maybe a part of this second house, eighth house axis for you is trying to navigate, okay, how can I still stay true to my core values in terms of independence and individuality, whilst also trying to collaborate, trying to cooperate, but with the same token, trying not to become swallowed up by too much agreeability, where then it can get to a point where, in fact, you explode. But you see, from that point, it can feel as if it's difficult to manage what has been said. And equally, this could also play out as justice. So because there is maybe denial or repression, right? The eighth house is about repression. Stuff can build and build and build, and then it all just comes out. And you come out with this whole sort of truth to do with Libra. And that can be quite intense. It can be really, really intense. So, yes, I think this is where it's important to maybe try and navigate a little bit. Okay, how am I actually receiving this other person? What's happening within me? What's being brought up? What's being triggered within me whenever maybe they do something I don't like, or whenever there is a disagreement. Moving on to Taurus in the second house with Scorpio in the eighth house. And it could very well be here that you have an Aries rising. All right. Okay. So, firstly, with Taurus in the second house here, what we see is that some of your core values involve, well, it's interesting with Aries, especially on the rising, but in actuality, you value patience, you value consistency, you value determination and being thorough. You may also value being quite resourceful, or maybe it's pleasure, right? It's pleasure, it's comfort, it's relaxation, these kinds of things. And at the same time, when it comes to your personal earnings and spending habits, things like that, I think that you can be quite mindful or thoughtful, or you prefer to just take things at a slower pace. And you also want to make sure that you have enough, right? So this is really about you prioritizing your livelihood. So I kind of imagine, for example, if it is that you want to save for something pretty important, I mean, this could be saving for a mortgage for a house. Okay, if that is a goal of yours, especially with Aries combined, but if that really is a goal of yours, you're going to be steady about it. You're going to be patient about it. And maybe what you do come to learn is that it's about seeing that, okay, you're not going to get there overnight, and you just have to steadily build up your savings. And then before you know it, with time, with effort, you'll have that mortgage, you'll have the money for the mortgage. So that's one way to look at it. And then I'm also going to say here that when it comes to the relationship that you have with your possessions and your assets, your materials, I mean, yeah, you can be pretty possessive at times. That's one way to perhaps look at it. But maybe another way to look at it is that it's all about support. It's about feeling supported. It's about feeling safe and secure. And that's what matters to you, right? That is ultimately what matters to you. So you may not just throw things out mindlessly, just as an example there. Yeah. And you can even be quite committed when it comes to saving for a certain item or product that you really, really want. Plus, I'm also going to say here that when it comes to your self-worth, right, there is a steadiness about your self-worth. There is this solid, this solid feel in that if other people shake up your self-worth, that can really signal to you, there's something about my self-worth or about how it is that I view myself or feel about myself it's not working so well. So what can I do to maybe change that a little bit, right? This is what we see here. Very, very interesting. And then when we look to Scorpio in your 8th house, well, when it comes to shared values, there's something quite transformative about shared values. For example, whenever you do enter into a committed, let's say this is more of a committed long-term relationship, it could be a marriage, it could be, this committed partnership. Basically, you are going to show up in this rather passionate way, in a way where you are determined, you're focused, you look at it as we are a couple. It could be even this whole like power couple dynamic, or it could be this feel of no one is going to get in the way of us together. And then trust is something that's very, very important to you. But here's the thing. Trust is something that you've also struggled with, I think. I think that with Scorpio in the 8th, there have been times whenever your trust has been broken, whenever other people have let you down. Also, we can look at this in terms of you needing to really build in terms of intimacy and vulnerability. That's so, so vital, so important. And whenever you do find somebody who you can be open with or vulnerable with, my words, I see this as you massively transforming. But then this is also where we see these challenges. Because if it is, for instance, that you get into some intimate relationship and maybe there's betrayal, maybe there's lies, deceit, etc., that can really shake you. That can shake you to your core. It could even trigger your self-worth to such an extent that you spiral. I mean, we could even look at this in terms of you using heavy substances to cope. And it can be very intense, let's just put it that way, when it comes to Scorpio. So therefore, I think what's really important here when it comes to the whole shared resources, shared finances, it is so important to you that your partners could even be tied to friends here, right? Close relatives as well. They're honest with you. I think that is pretty much one of the most important things that you prioritize when it comes to really establishing a deeper emotional bond. Do not lie to me. Don't lie to me. Yeah, this is about how honest others can be towards you, even if the truth hurts. Moving on to Gemini in the 2nd house with Sagittarius in the 8th house. And you could very well have a Taurus rising with this combination. But to explain here, with Gemini in the 2nd house, well, when it comes to your personal values, your core values, you might actually value flexibility, being quite versatile, humor as well. Wit could be something you value, even just thinking about being creative, being adaptable. Yeah, these are the kinds of things that you value. And logic, communication as well, right? You can maybe have this part of you, right? You possess this part of you that says communication is key. And so these are the kinds of things that you stand by, especially with Taurus on the rising, right? You're going to be quite strong about, yep, these are my values. I'm going to stay true to my values. Now, furthermore, we also notice that when it comes to your personal earnings and spending, Well, you could perhaps be a little bit fickle at times or scattered at times. I kind of imagine you having so many different savings accounts. Now, equally, we could look at this as you being quite intellectual, smart, clever about saving, about budgeting, about how you spend your money, right? You could even think to yourself, yeah, I'm going to be smart about this. I'm going to be logical about this. I'm going to figure out the facts. It's just that there can also be times whenever, well, you have multiple, multiple things that you need to save for example. Equally, it could be that you have multiple streams of income. So there is that. You can be quite creative in this respect. Okay, let's also explore how, when it comes to the very relationship you have with your possessions and your assets and your finances, I think that there is a curiosity about you. I think that even when it comes to, for example, buying something new, whenever you get that curious urge, it's difficult to let it go. I imagine you being quite a quick shopper, a quick spender at times. So if you want something bad enough, you're like, yep, I'm going to get that. And there's that curiosity about you. Equally, however, you're going to read the details. You're going to pay attention to the details. So you're not just going to buy any old product. You're going to look over the labels or the ingredients or what materials is it made out of? You know, what is even the quality or the substance there? If you see, yes, you're gonna read things over and explore. Okay, well, how does this function? How does it work? What do I need it for? You know, you're gonna really run through this sort of checklist, perhaps this mental checklist. But moving on, let's think about Sagittarius in your eighth. So when it comes to joint spending, when it comes to combining resources, combining finances with another, you're quite expansive, okay? You're going to use great foresight. I really imagine you being quite gifted or talented in terms of business, for example. So if it is that you decide to start a business, you run your own business, I do see you thinking more about, okay, well, where is this going? What do I want out of this? What's the meaning behind this? What is the future focus in this regard? Plus, you may find that whenever you do join up financially, this could be business wise. This could also be in terms of a marriage, right? When you combine resources through a marriage, just even a committed partnership, what happens? Opportunities just they open up. They open up. The expansion stuff, the growth stuff to do with Sagittarius here. And in this regard, you may find that whenever you do join together with another, there's some kind of luck. There's some significant growth where you could really benefit in a large way. I even think of this as you being really good at turning a profit. Yeah. And hey, you know what? You could draw from your possibly your talents, your skills, right, with the second house, your talents and skills to do with being a good salesperson or a good marketer, a good presenter, a good teacher, just using your intellect, using your communicative skills. These things can get you far. Okay. And then also, I'm going to say here, when it comes to your intimate life, well, a part of this could be where the whole intimacy stuff, the whole trying to bond on a more deeper emotional level, a part of that could scare you a little bit. A part of that can make you go, my freedom, do I want to be restricted? Do I want to be limited here? I don't know. So I think you're going to take your time. I think you're really going to be more mindful in terms of who you maybe open up to, who you share with, who you combine resources with as well. Moving on to Cancer in the second house with Capricorn in the eighth house. So it could very well be here that you've got a Gemini rising with this combination. Okay, so you just might value comfort, family traditions. You may value things that are quite nostalgic. I imagine you being the types of people who will keep things, right? You'll collect things. It could be like something that reminds you of your childhood. If it's nostalgic, you want to, if it creates that nostalgic feeling, you want to keep it. And then equally, we notice here when it comes to these core values of yours, sure, okay, nostalgic, but also sentimental. And you might also be quite sensitive to other people's needs. And perhaps this is what you were, in a way, conditioned to be like. Okay, so we think about this in terms of your own upbringing and your childhood. And so what you could have learned, maybe in a subconscious manner, is okay, well, I've got to be sensitive toward other people's needs. And this is what I value. This is what I value. And your moods are also going to fluctuate quite a bit when it comes to what you spend. I see this as you being quite emotional spenders, emotional shoppers, but equally very caring when it comes to spending. So I think about you spending your money on family, on loved ones. You can even be quite protective in this regard, right? You may value, of course, protecting what you own, right? We think about your possessions, your assets, being very protective there, but also you could just be quite protective of others in general, right? That could be something you value. Okay, but then whenever we explore, oh, actually, one more thing I do want to say in terms of just your self-worth quickly. If at any time you feel like your self-worth is being sort of triggered, more so in a negative way, you can clam up, okay? You can retreat. Or, hey, you could always act really sullen or snappy, or you can lash out. That could be another manifestation of this. Basically, you're going to protect yourself, right? But then you see with Capricorn in the eighth house, this is where we notice when it comes to joint spending, joint accounts, money that's combined. There's something quite restrictive about it. And I think that's something is partly what can scare you a little bit from commitment. It can scare you a little bit from maybe being with somebody else. So I'll give you an example. If you notice power struggles, power plays, where it appears as if someone is trying to dominate or control, and that could be done so through finances and wealth and materials. If you find that that's going on, you're going to pick up on that pretty quickly, right? Your Cancerian part of you basically will feel the feels. And then this is where you're going to become quite emotional, or this is where you're going to say, no, I need to protect myself. However, this is also where we see that anywhere Capricorn is, this is where we see it's important to recognize that, well, it requires patience, it requires time to work with this energy. So what do I mean by this? Well, this is about you hopefully getting to a point where you feel a bit more in control yourself. Where, for example, it's because I think what can play out with this is maybe depending on another person financially, but to your own detriment at times. So it is, I think, a part of what is going to maybe help you transform in many respects is how to support yourself, right? How to contribute to maybe a joint financial matter in a way where it's like, yep, I am showing integrity. I'm being responsible. I'm having some kind of control within this. However, another way to look at this is that you know your standards. You know your standards, and your standards could be quite high. So before it is that you maybe trust another, before it is that you commit to another, they need to align with your standards. This is what we see here too. Plus, I think that in a joint setting, of course, to explore this in a really positive light here, in a joint setting, this could be where, I mean, you're very ambitious with another. You could even start a business with your partner, you know, and maybe they run their own company and then you join it, or you literally run a business together. Or it is that as a team, right, as a couple, as a team, as a partnership, it's about you both coming together and going, what are we building together? Okay, what do we want to build for the future here? And you may find, again, in a similar way to what I was saying about Capricorn placements, you may find that this sort of outlook is more so presented a bit later on in your life. It's almost like you go through trials and tribulations related to maybe trust and bonding with others. Maybe some repression is there, right? And this stuff could also be really deeply tied to that of your family, your upbringing. So by you doing that inner work or exploring your own sort of blockages or repressions, that within itself can set you free. That within itself can actually help you progress and achieve the things that you and perhaps your significant other, what you want to achieve together. Moving on to Leo in the second house with Aquarius in the eighth house. Well, it could very well be suggested here that you have a Cancer rising. Okay, let's firstly begin by looking to this Leo influence in the second. And what this can indicate is that when it comes to your core values, right, your personal values, you may value your creativity. You may value loyalty, being self-assured. Your individuality could also be strongly valued here. Plus, your ability to just be enthusiastic, to be charismatic. You may also just be very generous with your finances. So, when we think about personal earnings and spendings, yeah, you can be quite a giving person in this regard. But I think, this is the thing, and especially when we combine this with Cancer, I think it's more so with the people within your close circle. So we think about family members that you trust, that you get along with really well. We think about certain friends of yours that you love and that you cherish. My goodness, you have such a big heart here. Yeah, I mean, this could very well be where you value your heart. You value just coming from this heart space and letting people know, right? Letting people know within your close circle, I love you. I'm here for you. I'm here to support you. Like, I'm thinking about you. So appreciative. You compliment people so well. You know how to sort of like let people know that they are loved. They're loved, they're special, they're celebrated. Though I'm also going to mention when it comes to this whole earnings and spending, I think that you might prefer to come at things from a more leadership view. And it's interesting because when it comes to being a leader, sure, this is about being a bit of a leader in terms of your personal earnings and savings and being able to budget well. But equally, I think this leadership quality, it's about being able to recognize maybe who needs support, who needs to be given that extra boost of confidence, or to helping them, maybe helping somebody else see their value, their worth. That could be a part of it. Or just, again, being generous with your own resources, with your own finances is perhaps just what you do, how you come across. And then I'm also going to say here, in terms of your self-worth, yeah, if your ego, this is the thing, there could be with this, the whole ego stuff to do with Leo. And then you may cut people down to size. You may even engage in competitive behaviors a little bit whenever your ego is hurt. Your pride can get hurt. You can even come across as boastful and arrogant a little bit with this influence. I think it just depends on what is triggered. That's the thing. It depends on how your self-worth is triggered. But equally, I'm also going to say, of course, there are those of you who don't feel that way, who don't act that way. Okay. You're able just to go, no, I know myself. I don't have to prove myself to you. Bye. Bye. Okay. Now, let's explore the eighth house though, because when it comes to joint spending, like joint accounts, joint money, resources, well, this is a fascinating one. You're not going to be super traditional about that. Mm-mm. I see this as you perhaps, okay, sure, having could be potentially a joint account. Let's go with your marriage partner, like your spouse, right? Let's go with that. But then you could also look at it as, well, I'm going to have my own account as well, and you have your own account. And I get that that perhaps is more of what happens anyway, the majority of the time. Um, but the way I'm looking at this is equally about your own independence too. That's more, I think the difference here is that that is the priority more so than anything. It's your independence. It's still about your freedom. And then also this could play out where how you go about doing things, right? How you go about maybe joining together in a financial way. You may think differently about that. You may think a little bit more unorthodox or a bit more unconventional. You tend to think more so outside of the box, and you may even invent a new way. Right? There could be some sort of inventive mindset that you possess when it comes to joint resources, is what I'm trying to get at here. And in terms of shared values, I think that ultimately, whenever you do come together with another person, what's important to you is that they value friendship and of course, loyalty and honesty and these kinds of things come into it. But it's also about being a part of, something bigger. It could be like a cause or a movement or being very charitable. You may really like when you combine basically with another person, it's with this bigger mission, this bigger cause. But equally, this is where we also see how misunderstandings can happen. And if at any point you feel misunderstood when it comes to like a joint venture, and this could be business wise, let's keep that in mind. If you feel misunderstood, if you feel like, oh, we're not really aligning anymore, right? Like minds do with Aquarius, and then the balance is off a bit there, then you might decide, you know what, this is not meant to be. I got to break away from this. I need to break free from this. I thought I wanted this in terms of a business strategy, in terms of our future together, but actually I need to prioritize myself. It depends, you see. That's the thing. That's the unpredictable thing about Aquarius. It depends on where you are, perhaps intellectually. It depends on where you are in terms of your future aims and goals. I mean, those things could drastically change throughout a marriage, throughout a partnership, again, business wise. But ultimately, when we return back to the second house, right, your worth, your self worth, your personal values, you go to yourself, okay, well, you got to think about yourself. I've got to think about myself. Moving on to Virgo in the second house and then Pisces in the eighth house. And it could very well be suggested that you have a Leo rising with this combination, okay? So, first and foremost, what we see here when it comes to your core values, your personal values, you value efficiency, you value correctness. I think that you also value having some kind of system, right? There's a systematic way that you do things. I think you also value your critical thinking skills, problem solving skills. And I think also, you value reliability, hard work. I especially consider here you being someone who holds yourself to a pretty high standard with Virgo in the second house. And in terms of your personal earnings and spendings, you're going to count the pennies. I think you're going to be quite savvy, quite mindful, quite smart about how you save, how you budget, how you spend your money. I actually think that you could do really well in terms of maybe offering your own services or running your own business, thinking even about self-employment here. And even as a worker, as someone who works within especially the service industry, you're going to be quite a diligent worker because you value, right? You value your hard work, you value your efforts here. And I think also, you're going to be quite correcting about your finances. If anything is ever out of place or missing, something like that, oh, you're going to notice. You're going to notice the details. And then, like I said, right, you're going to strive more so for being more correcting, right? It's like, what's the correct process here? What's the correct way of doing this? You're going to prioritize these parts of yourself, which will really show through. And whenever your self-worth is ever sort of triggered, perhaps more so, criticized, right? It could be where someone's critical of you, and then it's like, oh, it could play out where you take it very personally. It almost feels like a bit of a personal attack on you. Basically, what I'm trying to get at is you may not take criticism very well. It could have to be delivered in a certain way where it's sort of like, okay, well, I see this is the positive approach, but this is where we can see how things can be improved. But hey, you know what? I do think that there are those of you who are all about, right? Yes, tell me where I messed up. Tell me what I need to improve. Maybe it is just about the delivery. That's what is quite important to you. Okay, let's think about Pisces then in the 8th. My goodness, you're such sensitive people. Such sensitive people. So whenever we consider this in terms of shared values, maybe what you are seeking when you do combine with another, when you share with another, even thinking about the marriage space here, a business partnership, it's about compassion. It's about showing sensitivity. It's about being quite caring and supportive towards each other. And it could also be where there are certain fears and phobias that rise up to the surface a little bit, and they're asking you to take a look, and that could be quite daunting. Now, it could also play out where you have entered into more so shared ventures where there's been deception, there's been deceit. Thinking about, for example, you being conned out of a lot of money. I think about this in terms of you entering into this joint business with another, and then they completely bamboozle you. It could be where you feel victimized or you have been victimized. Now, a different way, of course, to explore this is by thinking about how whenever you do join together with another person, more so in an intimate setting, when there is trust that has been established, whenever you feel that connection, you can be so forgiving, so loving, so kind, so patient, so gentle with another. It matters also that you are given the same sort of compassion and kindness and gentleness. I think what's pretty much highlighted here is that there is something highly sensitive about trust and emotional bonding. And maybe a part of that involves vulnerability about your own sensitivities, vulnerability about the emotional connection that you're seeking. And when you do find someone who is perhaps more tender with you, just as an example, that is somewhat perfect to you. That I feel that is ultimately that's ultimately what I think you're seeking. That is something that you desire. And if at any time you find yourself maybe getting lost a little bit in the connection, or where there's some sort of uncertainty, or perhaps even more sinister things are going on there, you can bring it back to this Virgo part of you, where you're able to identify what's not working, what needs improved. Moving on to Libra in the second house with Aries in the 8th house. And you could very well have a Virgo rising with this combination, okay? Well, with Aries in the second house to begin with, what we notice when it comes to you is that some of your core values are actually that of agreeing, cooperating, just getting along with other people, keeping the peace, trying to make sure that conflict is managed well, and that before conflict gets out of hand, that you can maybe help out or intervene just to settle things a bit. And I also think that you value feeling a bit more balanced. I kind of think even in terms of your personal earnings, your personal spendings, for things to be more harmonious and balanced, that is important to you. So to make sure, for example, that you have enough money in your bank account to afford your rent or to afford food, even just to have some savings there. And so if anything feels out of balance, this could be where things they become quite tense for you, and that's just so uncomfortable for you. You don't like it. Now, following on from this point, we also notice that when it comes to your personal earnings and savings and things, there's still a sharing quality, there's still a sharing element where, for example, maybe other people, they're quite generous with you, they give to you, they want to support you, they want to help you out. But then equally, you want to repay the favor. Maybe that's something that you value. It's like if somebody helps you out, you want to repay the favor. You want to restore the balance, so to speak, or just to show your gratitude, to show your appreciation towards another person. And even when it comes to your self-worth, this is a tricky one, and it's something that you need to be a bit mindful of, and that is depending on other people to validate you, to sort of present to you, okay, this is what self-worth is. This is how you're going to feel worthy, right? There can be the whole feedback stuff to do with Libra, but this is about being mindful of how much you do that, how much other people's views and their feedback can shake you a bit, can take you away from, okay, well, the Aries side of you, I suppose, can take you away from your individuality, your independence. So this is a good segue. Good segue to talk about Aries in the 8th house, because what we notice here with Aries in the 8th house is that when it comes to shared values, when it comes to joint stuff, there is an independent streak. There is something about your shadow, your hidden self, that wants to consider your own personal goals, your own personal interests here, your passions. You can actually be very, very driven underneath the surface. And also, if you ever feel as if other people are trying to maybe take from you, this is where I suppose, your instincts can kick in. Now, what's also important to remember about this is we want to be mindful about maybe competitive tendencies or this hidden part of you that, yeah, you can jump in and almost compete with other people, especially if it is that you feel attacked, or if it is that you feel, again, we go back to this balance stuff, right? Where maybe you feel out of balance, or you feel a bit insecure within yourself or unsure about yourself. So we want to really manage this, and we want to think about, okay, how can you be a bit more accepting of who you are, your individuality, your independence, your leadership. And then I think also this is about being able to assert yourself, being able to stand up for yourself, to advocate for yourself. So to tap into these parts of you. But here's the really interesting thing is that these parts of you come out within intimate relationships. They come out. So whenever you do marry, for example, or you get into an intimate relationship, you surprisingly, you can be very forthright and honest, and you can say it like it is. You can be a bit of a firecracker in this regard. I'm kind of laughing because my moon is in Aries in the 8th house and I have this combination, and I can see parts of this within me. So there is that. And then I also think that there is quite a sexual side to you, and it's almost as if it's just waiting to be released. It's waiting to be let out, but with someone that you trust. Someone that you trust and that you can be vulnerable with. Oh, and also when we explore any potential anger issues or frustrations, right, the inner frustrations to do with Aries in the 8th house, maybe this is where looking to Libra in the 2nd can help you out. So what I mean by this is if you feel yourself feeling annoyed or frustrated, ask yourself, where is that coming from? Is there maybe something about your values that you're overlooking or that you're not respecting? Are you maybe giving your power away to other people? Are you maybe relying too much on other people to give you feedback about your self-worth? Right? Maybe that is something to consider. And if that is the case, then this is about you going, hold on a second. I'm not going to rely too much on other people to validate me. I can validate me. Now we're going to move on to, let's explore Scorpio in the 2nd house with Taurus in the 8th house. And you could very well have a Libra rising with this combination. So let's firstly begin by looking to some of your core values. What do you really value? Well, one thing could be that you value honesty, you value trust, you value people who don't just, they don't mess around, okay? They don't play mind games. You value even the parts of yourself that are quite investigative, passionate, tenacious, caring, loyal, right? These are the kinds of qualities we see here. And equally, when it comes to, well, when we think about your spendings, your personal, right, your personal spending, your personal earnings, there is a real deep attachment involved. I think that, well, one, it could be where you experience major losses, but also major gains financially. But then the other thing about it is we can look at this as you transforming greatly, right? You going through these massive leaps in progress and evolving. And you may also learn pretty quickly, pretty early on, that it's important to be a part of a team, right? Especially if you have Libra on the rising here. It's almost as if to say two minds are better than one. But you see, this is valuing the trust element, the trust aspect involved in that bond. This could be where you share resources. You know, it's really valuing sharing resources. It's valuing more of that combining influence with another person. Plus, when we consider the very relationship that you have with your possessions, your materials, there is something tenacious, something very determined about your relationship there. Naturally, however, there could be some layers of maybe fear coming into this, or possible hidden emotions, inner tensions, inner frustrations. There could be some compulsive energy here as well, hot and cold. There is that. And there could also be this possessiveness, strongly so. Now, we also want to think about the 8th house because, my goodness, I think with this combination, you're very financially savvy. You may be quite smart about your belongings, about your resources, about saving for the future, keeping what you have. You may put an effective plan in place. So when we consider sharing with the 8th house, Taurus there says, okay, let's find something that's dependable. Let's consider a dependable way, something that's consistent, reliable. Let's combine our resources together in more of a level-headed, attentive, thorough way. So I see this as you could very well gain a lot of wealth with this combination, right? Gaining a lot of wealth, status. You could also gain good security. Thinking about this, especially in terms of feeling safe, feeling secure. So I'm thinking here about property and ownership, but I'm also going to say that there could be some power struggles present as well. I'm considering secrets, hiding money. And if or when that happens, it can create a lot of conflict within the relationship. So perhaps this is where, with Taurus in the 8th house, something to consider in terms of shared values is it's really about being reliable. And then we bring it back even to that of your core values, and that's about being honest. Of course, this can play out in many different ways, but yes, indeed, there is a side to this that can indicate power struggles over resources. But to finish this off on a more positive note, I mean, whenever trust has been established, which it takes time, okay, it's slow, it's gradual with Taurus. Whenever trust has been established, this is where we notice such essential connection when we think about your intimate life, emotional bonding, that there is essential element there. And there's so much loyalty. This could manifest as a very deeply loyal relationship, a loyal marriage. Moving on, let's now explore Sagittarius in the 2nd with Gemini in the 8th, and you could very well have a Scorpio rising with this combination. But how might this play out? Well, with Sagittarius in the 2nd house to begin with, my goodness, you are going to stay true to your values. I mean, your values and your morals are very closely linked. So what I imagine this as is you not just talking the talk, but you walking the walk, right? This is you staying true to what your core beliefs, what your core values and morals are, your principles, living that, breathing, living that. And then also valuing travel, valuing adventure, valuing knowledge. It's this whole thing of knowledge is power with this one, I think. And that's so interesting because to have Scorpio in combination with this, it's almost as if to say nobody can pull the wool over your eyes because you've acquired the knowledge, you've acquired the experience, and so you value these things. Plus, when it comes to spending, when it comes to your personal earnings, okay, there can be times, or there can be those of you who may experience luck. So for instance, this could be a huge reduction, some sort of huge reduction that happens, and that's a lucky moment because you can finally get that item that you want. Or this could be you winning some kind of holiday. right? You could win a holiday. You could win the lottery with this, my goodness, just as one example. Even just bets, things like that, gambling to do with Sagittarius in the second. But hey, you know what? Another way to look at this is you just valuing your gratitude, right? And it's your gratitude. It's your feelings of being blessed and appreciative that really comes through here. It's fortune. It's saying that, hey, do you know what? Yeah, there has been a bit of a rocky patch, but I am still grateful for this, or I trust that times are going to change, and that's life. It's all of the philosophical stuff to do with Sagittarius. Okay, so it's these views, it's your philosophies, it's your worldviews that keep you going. And maybe also an element of this is hope, it's faith, it's trust. It's like things are going to get better. I believe it's going to get better. In fact, I know that it's going to get better. It's just the way it is at the moment. It's that sort of outlook, which is quite remarkable. And oh my goodness, freedom is massive here. You may value your freedom. Financial freedom could be a big part of this as well. However, I suppose one thing to be mindful of is excess. Yeah. Yeah, you could go overboard when it comes to spending. Let's just put it that way. But equally, you could gain a lot too. Okay, let's now think about Gemini in the eighth. So, with Gemini in the eighth, when it comes to joint spending, joint finances, well, this is where we see logic being necessary or being important, being logical, being quite well educated on the subject. So, what I'm getting from this is, let's just give an example. Let's say that you and your significant other, right, your partner, your spouse, you're thinking of maybe joining together for financial reasons. It could be for a mortgage, it could be for a certain holiday, right? Whatever that is, you're going to be smart about it. You're going to have the questions. You're going to be quite intellectual. You're going to do your research. Even when it comes to things like loans, support, financial support, paying off debts, things of that nature. Yeah, you're going to do your research. And you might also, when we think about this in terms of intimate life, you might truly value communication, right? It's being able to communicate within that intimate relationship and to be quite honest. So, even honesty could be really, really important here, especially when we think about your intimate partner with you. And you may be quite mindful of that. And maybe you can also pick up on when things do not make sense, when things don't add up, especially with Scorpio on the rising. Plus, I do think that you're willing to learn. You're quite open to learning in terms of joint businesses, joint ventures. So, if it is, for example, that you want to enter into more of a joint partnership, right, a business partnership, again, similar to what I was saying earlier, you're going to do your research. And then I'm also thinking here that when it comes to intimacy and trust, it's through communication. It's like, the more that you learn about your partner, about your spouse, that's exciting. That keeps things interesting. There's that curiosity present. However, if at any time you sense that there is lies, well, this is where we look to the second house and we consider, okay, what are your morals? Staying true to your morals, remember. Oh, yes, you're gonna return to, does this align with my moral compass? Then maybe I gotta guess or question the loyalty within this relationship, as one example. Okay, let's now move on to Capricorn in the second with Cancer in the eighth. And you could very well have a Sagittarius rising with this combination. Okie dokie. So, firstly, whenever we think about your core values with Capricorn in the second house, some of your core values include integrity, responsibility, follow through. Surprisingly, I know a Sagittarius on the first. Also, hard work, being practical, and following a plan or being disciplined. These are the kinds of things that you value, especially when it comes to finances, your earnings. We notice here you being quite self-sufficient, but equally being self-reliable. You're the kinds of people that actually others can depend on, right? So if there is maybe some sort of issue, it could be involving money, for instance, you're going to think about the best plan forward. And we also see here you managing your own personal resources and being mindful of your spending habits and planning, especially for the future. We think about the long term with Capricorn in the second. However, and again, this goes back to how it's quite interesting that Sagittarius is on, if you have Sagittarius on the rising, but we see here with Capricorn in the second, remember, things take time. So we also notice some trials and tribulations, tests, for example, to do with finances. I mean, one example of this could be earlier on in your life. So when you were much younger, you could have been a bit more reckless. Again, especially with Sagittarius on the rising, a bit more reckless, a bit more careless, a bit more like YOLO, okay? But as you do age, as you mature and grow through experience, of course, like financial experiences, or maybe being close to like being in debt or close to losing something, it's through those experiences that perhaps you have learned a great deal, right? You're able to go, oh, wow, through my hardships, through my challenges with my finances and my money and my earnings, do you know what? I'm actually a really responsible person, and that's what I've grown to be or to become. And if you're not there yet, that could very well be in your future, right? And the other thing I'm going to say here about the very relationship that you have with your possessions. So we think about ownership here and materials, possessions. I think that you're going to take things quite seriously. Now, again, this is all about how you learn and how you put in the effort. But I think that there's a certain level of seriousness, cautiousness present, being disciplined, maybe even when it comes to a certain skill set of yours, whatever that may be. If it is, for example, that you want to become quite skilled within a certain area, it could be related to your career with Capricorn there. My goodness, you're going to put in the work. You're going to put in the work. You could also be well known, right? Well known for your skills with Capricorn in the second. But let's move on to Cancer in the 8th. Because with Cancer in the 8th, what we see here when it comes to joint spending, joint finances and earnings, there's a tenacious quality. There's a holding security focus present. There's a protectiveness present. So this right here is another example. And I was saying this to those, so I basically was talking about this with those who have Scorpio in the second with Taurus in the 8th. Could be Libra risings naturally. But in a similar way, this could be where you're very financially savvy, especially whenever you tag team, so to speak, whenever you get together with another. Could be through marriage, for instance. There is this protectiveness that you both bring. And so you're both going to be mindful in terms of, okay, what are we spending? And how are we going to budget? How are we going to save as a union, as a couple? Right? Cancer is such a security-oriented sign. And even if it's not a marriage, I mean, if it is, for example, that you want to perhaps consider, okay, a business, right? There's some sort of shared venture within a business, right? It involves combining resources, combining money. Again, right? You're going to be quite savvy about that. You're going to be quite protective about that. And a lot of this then is about you feeling safe. Okay, this is where we see feelings of security. And I'm also going to suggest, because this is Cancer and Capricorn involved, I can't help but think that a big part of what leads you down this path is your upbringing. For example, this could be the kind of ways that your parents managed money, could have been in a more beneficial way, but even if it wasn't in a beneficial or helpful way, you're going to learn, right? You're learning from how your parents did it. You're learning from traditions or family values, things like that. So it's those kinds of experiences that help shape your very attitudes towards money, both on a personal level and then in terms of shared resources. Though, whenever we think about this in terms of your intimate life, again, this is about feeling safe. So if it is that you are to be vulnerable, if it is that you are to open up about your emotions, how you're really feeling, you need to feel safe. And the minute that you don't feel safe, we can look at this as returning back to that Capricorn influence, so to speak. What could happen is you could grow cold. You could go, no, I'm guarded. I'm going to guard myself here, which is essentially you protecting yourself, right? All right, so moving on, let's now explore Aquarius on the 2nd with Leo on the 8th. And you could very well have a Capricorn rising with this combination. Okay, so whenever we explore your core values, your personal values with Aquarius on the 2nd, you value your independence, having your own mind. You value being able to think for yourself, essentially. I think you also value community, like minds, interestingly, as well. But of course, that's more about how you connect with those people too. You value being able to experiment, being able to invent things, maybe innovate things. You can be quite skilled in this regard, I think. You could be quite well known for your skills of innovation or your skills of thinking outside of the box, right? Seeing things from a different angle, a different view. And, excuse me, another thing I'm going to say about this is when it comes to your spending and your personal earnings, we could see this also as you being quite experimental or you thinking a bit differently. And you're not really going to do what everybody else is doing. I kind of imagine this as the way you budget. So how you budget, how you save, how you even spend or shop or sell, it's very unique to you. You could have some unique quirk or just something that you need to do. And then the other thing about it is you're not really going to follow the advice of others, and you're not really going to care about what other people think either. I imagine this as you being unapologetically yourself. And then I also think when it comes to your very relationship with possessions and materials, equally, I think you can be charitable. You can be very generous and thoughtful, kind, right? Just, yeah, very, very giving towards others. Maybe you're also especially quite giving with your friends. Maybe you value friendship as well. So people that you are friendly with or who you're good friends with, because I do think with Aquarius here, especially with Capricorn on the rising, you can be quite selective. But basically, when it comes to these friendships of yours, my goodness, because you value them so much, you're going to show up. You're really going to show up as a team player. And equally at the same time, again, you're going to value having a mind of your own. You can, I think, at times detach when you need to, for example. And that detachment could show up more so when it comes to your self-worth. So if at any point maybe someone undermines you or dismisses you, oh, they're going to get the cold They're going to get the detachment. Oh, who are you again? I don't know who are you talking about? It's that sort of energy here. Okay, but let's move on to Leo in the 8th, because when it comes to joint spending, joint finances, well, there is something quite influential about this stuff. My word, I could even see this as you attracting pretty famous people, or like being involved with quite popular people, or people with a lot of influence. And you may really enjoy that secretly, because then you get a lot of attention from that as well. Or it could be where just feeling seen within a relationship, an intimate relationship, that matters a lot. So the moment that you don't feel seen, the moment that you don't feel appreciated or loved, that's when you can go back to this Aquarius influence, and then, yeah, you go cold. And that is a form of self-preservation, I guess. And what's also interesting about this is when it comes to shared values, I think that when you do join together intimately with another person, could be financially with another person, so we think about marriage, I think that the shared values, they have to be about celebration and just really like connecting with each other and making each other feel special and seen. And again, it's about appreciating one another. Maybe you think to yourself, of course, I want a committed relationship or an intimate relationship where I'm appreciated, and if I'm not, then why the heck am I here? What good is this to me? What use is this to me? It needs to feel like that. It needs to feel like there is some sort of love connection, that you can be affectionate with one another. There's so much heart. There's heart and soul present within the union. But to think about this in terms of joint spending and, shared accounts and shared resources, perhaps you do still prefer to have your own individual thing going on as well. And then equally, I think that, well, it's almost like the combining of resources is a way to embrace or have fun, right? To embrace one another, to have fun together, to be playful with each other, to entertain yourselves. I think that fun and creativity and feeling like you can just let your hair down, enjoy yourself, these are the kinds of qualities that you're seeking. And if you've got Capricorn on the rising, it's interesting because Capricorn is often known for being such a hard worker, but really with Capricorn, they work hard so they can play hard. So with Leo in the 8th house, it all makes sense in this regard. Okay, so lastly then, let's move on to Pisces in the 2nd house with Virgo in the 8th house. And you could very well have an Aquarius rising with this combination. So with Pisces on the 2nd house, firstly, you value your spirituality practices. You value your dreams. You value your visions, your fantasies, maybe being a little bit delusional sometimes. You value also how caring and compassionate you can be. You value selflessness. So already what we notice here is that the moment that you can recognize that people are not being so selfless, they're not being so kind, they're not being so loving, let's just put it that way, you could take that quite personally or get upset by that. It can sadden you perhaps quite deeply. We even could look at this through a lens of you becoming swept up in the sorrows, the suffering of humanity, the suffering of the collective, their pain, you maybe being a bit of an emotional sponge, right? Sort of absorbing other people's emotions, especially their pain. Just very sensitive, very sensitive. And it's not to say that being sensitive is bad, But it's just that whenever this sensitivity, this very heightened sensitivity influences you, then this is where you got to be a little bit mindful, I think. Plus, I'm also going to say here, when we think about self-worth, it's so fascinating to see the combinations, because with Aquarius, with Aquarius on the rising, especially, so again, self-worth stuff, there could be something sacrificing about your self-worth, right? Sort of sacrificing yourself for mankind, for the collective. And I suppose that's where we get into the whole Leo in the 7th house influence, but that's for another story. Still, maybe because of that, this can be where other people can influence you too much. So with the whole, I suppose a way to put this could be dissolving your self-worth to maybe merge with something higher, to merge with a higher power in this regard. This is where you got to be mindful a little bit, because this could play out where other people try to enforce, they try to manipulate, or they try to tell you who you are, right? So maybe being mindful of falling for like cults and manipulative figures and false gurus and false prophets with this influence. And when it comes to spending and your personal earnings, okay, you could misplace things quite a bit. You may be forgetful. As soon as you have money in your hands, it's gone. It's gone. And that, you know what, that might not even be out of any, that might not even be your fault, basically, right? That could be something that's just, it almost feels like hi universe. But I'm also going to say it's so fascinating. And I'm smiling because I'm reflecting on this a little bit myself. But equally, this could be where it almost seems like God, the universe, the creator has your back. So sure, you may get money and then lose it all, but then all of a sudden, you don't see it, right? With Pisces, all of a sudden, you have so much money. It's almost like especially whenever you do good deeds, or whenever you live a life that in accordance, let me repeat that. Whenever you live a life in accordance with your spiritual values, with your spiritual morals, here we go. You're topped up, you're topped up, you're topped up. Very, very interesting. Okay, let's move on. Let's think about, and just to say, you can be very charitable, very giving. And maybe there are those of you who appreciate that, yeah, money is money. I don't have to attach myself too much to it. It is what it is. And you trust that, like, you're going to be topped up. Things are going to come back around for you. Your good deeds are going to be rewarded. Okay, let's now think about Virgo. So Virgo in the 8th house, when it comes to joint spending, joint accounts, this is interesting. This is really interesting, because this is where you can actually be quite critical, where you can be a little bit picky, fault finding. You can be perfectionists. So whenever you share financially with another, this is where you're like, oh, I need to make sure that everything's correct, everything's organized. This is fascinating, because it's this kind of attitude that can even shape and influence your values. They can shape and influence this whole attitude that you have towards your personal spendings. So then this could be where, because you're making a fuss so much about all of the everyday sort of meticulous stuff to do with joint finances, because you're so caught up in that, it's hard for you to appreciate what you have individually. Do you see? So this is where perhaps being able to recognize this part of yourself can be useful, to be mindful of this overly aggressive at times or overly obsessive, the whole fixating stuff to do with the 8th house. The obsessive, fixating perfectionist. But equally, this is also about healthy improvement. Healthy improvement. So when we consider this from a lens of your intimate life, you can think to yourself, okay, well, what can we improve? Practically speaking, what can I do? What can I adjust? What changes can I make? How can I adapt so that our relationship is better? And that then involves transformation and renewal. All right, so everyone, this has been today's video, all about your 2nd and 8th house. So we really explored your possessions, your personal earnings, your personal spendings, things like that. And then we also explored your intimate life and joint spendings, joint accounts. I hope that you found today's video to be helpful. Let me know if you did. Of course, if you did, please make sure to like the video, subscribe for more. If you would like to book a reading with me, you can go to hannahselsewhere.com. And if you did really enjoy today's video, then you can always buy me a coffee. Thank you for listening, everyone, and I will talk to you in the next one. Bye!